Is your workout discipline actually destroying your progress? I know, it sounds totally counterintuitive, right? We've all been spoon-fed this idea that training hard every single day, no rest days, no deloads, is the ultimate picture of commitment. From the outside, it looks like pure, unfiltered discipline. But today, we're challenging that head-on. Because treating recovery as this optional, kind of lazy thing, that might actually be the exact thing holding you back. Here's our roadmap for today's explainer. We're going to start with the discipline trap, move into a practical guide for real recovery, tackle how to stop the silent shrink, look at the realities of the squeezed sandwich generation, and wrap up with making your health absolutely non-negotiable. All right, part 1, the discipline trap and why the whole no days off mentality totally fails after 40. Let's look at the actual physiological reality of how our bodies build strength. See, your muscles don't actually get stronger during the workout itself. They get stronger during the recovery window afterward when the tissue actually repairs and rebuilds. Now, back in your 20s, that recovery window was super fast and entirely passive. It was plenty. But in your 40s, recovery just flat out takes longer than it used to. If you skip that required downtime by bringing the exact same intensity and frequency from your 20s, you're not stacking progress. You're just stacking damage that never fully resolves before your next session adds even more to the pile. So what happens when we just ignore this shift? Well, we start seeing a very specific cascade of symptoms. You might keep training at the same frequency, but suddenly you just feel more beat up. You're prone to these nagging injuries that just refuse to go away, and your overall fatigue spikes. And here's the grand irony of it all. Instead of connecting these dots to poor recovery, people mistakenly conclude they just need to push harder to break through the plateau. They push harder to compensate, which, you guessed it, makes the problem exponentially worse, and that often leads to injuries bad enough to bench you for months. Which brings us to a massive mindset shift. And I really want you to hear this. Recovery isn't the opposite of progress. It's the mechanism that makes progress possible. I get it. For a lot of us, taking a day off feels super uncomfortable. It feels like you're falling behind or losing that hard-earned momentum. But we've got to let go of that guilt. Reframing a rest day as an active, absolute requirement for getting stronger, that's the difference between someone who sticks with training for decades and someone who burns out or blows out a knee in a few months. Okay, moving right along to part 2, our practical guide for real recovery and how to actually start rebuilding your routine. So, how do we actually escape this trap? Here is your step-by-step playbook for designing a sustainable week after 40. First, and this is non-negotiable, you have to schedule 1 to 2 full rest days per week. Treat these rest days as an official part of your training program, not a break from it. Seriously, write it down in ink. Second, dial back specific painful movements. You don't have to dial back your overall commitment, but be smart about the mechanics causing you grief. And third, protect a single hour purely for yourself, just to ensure you have the bandwidth to actually recover. And let me emphasize an absolutely critical rule here. If something aches for more than a few days, that is information, not weakness. You have to actively monitor that nagging pain, and frankly, you gotta swallow your pride a bit. Pushing through joint pain out of sheer ego is literally the fastest way to end up stuck on the couch for the next 6 months. Listen to the data your body is giving you. All right, section 3, stop the silent shrink. Let's talk about the reality of mobility. This brings us to another huge mistake people make, skipping mobility work completely. Look at this. In your 20s and 30s, you're in a phase of passive maintenance. Just living an everyday active life is usually enough to keep your joints moving freely. But in your 40s and beyond, we enter what's called active shrinkage. Basically, any range of motion that isn't actively used starts to quietly shrink. And look, mobility isn't about flexibility for its own sake. It's not some party trick where you touch your toes. It's about maintaining everyday joint functions, reaching overhead to grab a heavy plate, turning your neck to check a blind spot, or just bending down to tie your shoes without letting out that involuntary dad groan. We've all been there. Because this shrinkage is silent, the consequences aren't super dramatic at first. They sneak up on you as small compensations. You start favoring one side when you bend, or you notice a surprisingly tight hip, maybe a restricted shoulder reach. But over the years, these little restrictions compound into stiffness, a shuffling walk, or having a really tough time getting out of a low chair. And people love to falsely blame these downstream effects on, quote, inevitable aging. But guess what? Almost none of that is inevitable aging. It is simply the result of joints that just stopped being moved through their full range of motion for years. But hey, the fix here is incredibly reassuring.
10 minutes. That is all it takes. You don't need to go buy some expensive hour-long hot yoga studio membership. Just 5 to 10 minutes a day of deliberate stretching for your hips, shoulders, spine, and ankles is entirely enough to maintain the range of motion that keeps your ordinary, daily movements effortless. And the best time to start is right now, before you even notice a problem, because maintaining mobility is so much easier than trying to restore it once it's gone.
Let's shift gears and look at the emotional driver behind all these mistakes in Section 4, the squeezed sandwich generation and the root cause of burnout. This is probably the biggest habit we need to break. And honestly, it might be the one driving all the others. It's consistently putting your own health at the absolute bottom of your priority list. Think about it. If you're in your 40s, you're likely raising kids, supporting aging parents, and managing a high-stakes career all at the same time. You are officially in the sandwich generation. And I just want to validate your exhaustion right now. Your 40s are frequently the most squeezed decade of your entire life. You are responsible for people above you and below you. So feeling squeezed isn't some character flaw, and being exhausted isn't a failure to prioritize. It is just the structural default of this phase of life. Because taking care of everyone else feels so incredibly responsible, taking care of yourself can easily feel, well, selfish by comparison. But we have to break down that guilt right now. Taking care of yourself is not in competition with taking care of the people you love. Deprioritizing your health doesn't make you more capable of helping them. The version of you managing a totally preventable health crisis at age 55 because you postponed everything for 15 years is going to be way less capable of showing up for your family when they really need you later. Protecting even a small amount of time for your own health along the way is exactly what makes your ability to care for others sustainable for decades, not just for the next couple of years. Look at it as an investment. It is an investment in your family's future stability just as much as your own. Which perfectly tees up our final takeaway in Section 5. Make your health non-negotiable. The fix here isn't to make yourself the only priority, but to make yourself a non-negotiable priority. We have to stop treating our personal health as the one flexible item on a calendar where everything else is set in stone. So I want to leave you with this provocative question to chew on. Honestly, ask yourself, when was the last time a calendar event existed purely for your health, with absolutely no one else attached to it? If you can't remember, then it's time for a small adjustment to your system. Implement the recovery guide we talked about today. Schedule those rest days, dial back the ego when you feel nagging pain, stretch for just 10 minutes, and reclaim one protected hour this week that belongs entirely to you. You've got this. Thanks. Why is fitness suddenly failing you after 40? You might literally be feeling this right now. You hit the gym just like you always have, you run the exact same routes, but out of nowhere, there's this unexplained physical friction. The things that used to effortlessly keep you in shape, they just aren't working anymore. It's incredibly frustrating, right? Well, your frustration is completely valid. It is not in your head, and it is certainly not a lack of willpower on your part. But listen, rather than just complaining about the weird aches and that frustrating plateau, we're going to take control and create a clear 5-step action plan to actually fix it. For most people, that sudden friction starts at a very specific, undeniable milestone, the big 40. Crossing this age threshold isn't just some psychological hurdle or a mindset thing. It is a profound biological reality. It demands a deliberate shift in our daily routines and habits. Biologically speaking, our hormone profiles shift, our cellular turnover slows down, and our metabolic rate begins to naturally dip. You know what got you through the sheer invincibility of your 20s and 30s? Yeah, that simply won't sustain you here. The old playbook is officially obsolete. We have to completely change our approach. Okay, let's jump straight into the blueprint. Step 1 in our 5-step action plan focuses on mindsets. Stop looking back. Before we tackle the physical stuff, we really have to fix the mental game. Because if your head isn't in the right place, those physical habits are never, ever going to stick. One of the most damaging mental traps you can fall into after 40 is constantly comparing your current body and performance to who you were 20 years ago. It is a guaranteed recipe for failure. Why? Because chasing your old college personal records usually leads to overtraining, severe mental defeat, and ultimately a nasty injury. Think about the classic weekend warrior, right? The guy who tries to sprint the same pace he did in high school and ends up with a torn calf muscle on a Saturday morning. Instead, the small, highly doable fix here is shifting your perspective to your own recent baseline. Track your progress against who you were last month or at most last year. It's a completely different comparison point that roots your goals in your current reality. That is what sets you up for sustainable progress rather than just constant disappointment. Moving right along, steps 2 and 3 focus on the body, fuel and recovery.
Now we get to the physical habits. And wow, there is a massive gap here between the effort we think we're putting in and the actual results we're getting. Let's look at fuel first. Skipping protein at most meals is something busy people do completely without realizing it. You grab a quick piece of toast for breakfast, maybe a tiny salad for lunch, and suddenly you've missed out on the exact building blocks your aging body desperately needs. Scientifically, once we hit our late 30s and 40s, a process called sarcopenia, which is basically just a fancy word for age-related muscle loss, really begins to accelerate. To counteract that, to repair tissue and support a changing metabolism, your body requires significantly more high-quality protein just to maintain the muscle you already have. The direct, simple fix? Actively add a dedicated protein source to every single meal. Making sure it's the absolute cornerstone of every plate changes the biological game entirely. Then we have the recovery side of the physical equation. That old school, no days off mentality of relentlessly grinding and pushing through workouts 7 days a week, that's a habit you absolutely have to drop right now. You literally cannot outwork a lack of recovery. As we cross into our 40s, our central nervous system, think of it like your body's battery, takes much longer to bounce back from high-intensity stress. Even more importantly, our joint tissues, like our tendons and ligaments, take significantly more time to repair and rebuild than they did back in our 20s. Pushing through without real recovery just compounds the damage. Your body repairs, adapts, and actually gets stronger during the rest, not during the workout itself. So the highly effective fix here is taking a real, dedicated rest day. Implementing genuine recovery time isn't a luxury, it is entirely non-negotiable if you want longevity. Now for the final pieces of the puzzle. Steps 4 and 5 are all about you, maintenance and priority.
Look, it only takes 10 minutes of daily mobility work to fix the habit of neglecting your joints. Just 10 minutes. So many of us ignore maintenance until it's already a screaming problem, until we tweak a knee or wake up with a stiff lower back that just ruins our entire week. But here's the fascinating thing. Mobility work isn't just static stretching. According to the research, active mobility work moves your joints through their full ranges of motion, and that actively stimulates the production of synovial fluid. Think of it exactly like oiling the hinges on a rusty door. 10 minutes a day of dynamic, controlled movement actively lubricates those joints. It keeps the stiffness at bay long, long before it ever becomes an actual injury.
Okay, be honest. We are notoriously used to putting our own health dead last on a massive list where everyone else, our kids, our spouses, our bosses, comes first. Especially in our 40s, the demands of careers and families really tend to peak. But continually putting yourself last absolutely guarantees burnout. There's no way around it. The crucial fix here is claiming just one daily, non-negotiable habit that is purely for you. This is what makes the 5-step action plan real and tangible. It could be 15 minutes of uninterrupted reading with your morning coffee, a daily meditation session, or maybe a 20-minute solo walk completely without your phone. Whatever it is, it anchors your day. It ensures that your baseline well-being doesn't completely slip through the cracks of your endless daily obligations.
Bringing it all together, let's look at your 5-step action plan, building the blueprint. So, here is the complete 5-step action plan, designed specifically to work without requiring a massive, dramatic life overhaul. 1. Use a recent baseline to track your progress. 2. Actively place a protein source at every meal. 3. Force yourself to take a real rest day to let your central nervous system recover. 4. Dedicate 10 focused minutes to active joint mobility. And 5. Create one non-negotiable habit just for you. Boom. This is exactly how you close the gap between your effort and your actual results. It's concise, it's clear, and most importantly, it is entirely doable starting right now.
Now, if you are listening to that list and feeling just a little bit overwhelmed by the idea of adding 5 brand new things to your plate, take a deep breath. Actually, scratch that feeling of overwhelm entirely. As the source material so perfectly puts it, pick the one that hit hardest. Start there. That's genuinely the whole strategy. The absolutely crucial point here is that you do not have to tackle all 5 of these today. Lower that barrier to entry. Just pick the one specific gap in your routine that made you cringe a little bit when we discussed it and fix that one first. Mastery of one single habit is miles better than failing at 5.
Everything we've covered today is part of a much larger, cohesive system created by the team behind the Longevity Blueprint. It covers these specific habits, plus 5 other vital pillars of aging well. And what makes the source material so incredibly compelling is that it is completely free of those ridiculous internet fads and empty hype. It's grounded purely in what actually works biologically after 40. complete with planners and trackers to help you put this knowledge into hard practice. Because let's be real, knowing what to do is completely useless if you don't actually execute it, right?
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a pretty provocative thought. Which of these 5 habits is costing you your longevity right now? Take a hard, honest look at your daily routine. Identify the one single area that hit closest to home today and make the firm commitment to change that one small thing tomorrow morning. Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible blueprint. I highly encourage you to take that first step for yourself